Who's up?
I think it's me. Have we lost Christian?
No,
Yeah,
just about, I never worked with Apache Brooklyn, you said, mentioned before.
Yeah.
If you may say some more details about this, what benefits you see. I have to look myself, I know, but if you give some suggestions about it.
I've only come across Apache Brooklyn in the last week, so I haven't had a chance to play around with it.
Okay.
But it fits in the technical orchestration in that you can use any kind of platform underneath, or you could use Terraform underneath, or it's pretty pluggable in the tools that you can actually plug into it, and it's pretty. You can extend it to support other tools as well.
Yeah.
So it supports, I think, Chef out of the box, and there is a salt module, but it's pretty restrictive. It's only running in the salt local mode, kind of a salt call.
Okay. Yeah, well, I'm asking before, I had a project, it worked fine, everything was fine technically, but management wasn't really happy about how all results presented. Not everyone happy to see the Jenkins things, because they need more bigger picture for sort of result metrics tools when all the sessions show the status and we drill down with the things. So there's something I still looking for certain things, front end if you like.
Yes, so
Yeah.
kind of where's the business value, or where's the direct business value for those type of consumers.
Yeah.
So have you looked into pipelines?
Yes, I'm consuming pipelines and it works fine.
It
For
works.
me, as a technical person,
Yeah.
let's say, I'm happy with this, I'm pretty, but when you have in the organization about 100 deals or test sessions running at the same time, commit,
noisy.
let's say, everyone, the management need to look at the whole picture.
Yeah.
For the risk evaluation, estimation, what the picture is, the whole thing is not really going for each particular session. So this, aside from the things from what we're talking about, but there's something I'm still looking for such solution.
And in the past, I've seen custom solutions built around visualizing the pipelines.
Uh-huh.
So people have actually built custom UIs using various tools and frameworks to actually pull that information out and display it in a high value sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Brooklyn, I think, does have a nice UI on front. Now, I haven't looked at it to know what capabilities it has, but it has both the command line and the UI level.
Yes, interesting. I will look myself. I'll try to use the Grafana and Graphite before. There's some nice tools with conjunction with this one, but I still have to complete this to make it more universal. I mean, more. It's still not happy about.
Sure.
Thank you.
Out of interest, so you're talking about trying to keep your slaves ephemeral, essentially, and on demand.
Yeah. So.
How have you found your use of Jenkins masters? Do you treat them ephemerally, or are they like a bit like pets, where you rebuild them, or do you just have long-running instances? And like one of the issues we've encountered, we haven't really gotten back to it, but there seems to be general consensus that we'd like the Jenkins master itself to be a bit more scalable, whether it's ephemeral or not. But have 2-3 instances just running and sit behind the load balancer. Have you any experience in terms of trying to scale the master horizontally rather than just vertically?
No, but I have been looking into it. So I have been looking into to putting it in a beanstalk in that sense. But on the ephemeral containers, so that solves a bigger problem as well. It solves the isolation of builds. So it's no two builds can run in the same environment, and the workspace is also expunged after the container finishes. So it's a bit more secure in that sense, in that artifacts aren't laying around and you don't have old builds polluting or compromising new builds. Now, to actually achieve that for us is going to be difficult, because people have gotten used to that their artifacts and the contents of the directories are always going to be there.
Yeah.
But on the ephemeral, on the scaling of the masters, no, it wouldn't be an issue for us. It's the one instance. We have multiple instances performing different sets of roles. So a different instance for deployment, a different instance for building. So it's that air-gapped approach.
So you kind of segment your you have multiple masters and just segment what runs what.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
One of the, just to build on that a little bit, one of the crazy criteria we had for big company problem. We have a bunch of different teams trying to do some stuff. Those different teams might be in different AWS environments, so we somehow need a deployment plan where we can consolidate down how we deploy to environments, but not give any individual team too much power to be able to do too much crazy stuff. And so what we're looking into is our security approval process happens at the pull request stage. So that's where we have more eyes on a problem. Once code's been validated to get into a Git workflow, that we can then work with it from there. So effectively, security happens up to the PR. Once code makes it into Git, at that point we can go through deployment process. We're validated to go through deployment process. So as part of that, the code that does the deploy. So you have your, I don't know, Java, whatever that ends up on a beanstalk. You have your AWS provisioning code, and you have your Jenkins pipeline that all live next to each other in a repo. If someone needs to deploy this bit of code to a dev environment, the Jenkins pipeline itself references this is going to go to the cloud services dev environments, like some team, some dev environment. And the active provisioning of that node, when it gets to Jenkins, will cause Jenkins to spin up an AWS ephemeral agent that has an IAM policy that allows it to build to just that environment. And so we can validate where code is getting deployed based on the contents of the pipeline. So our validation and tracking of everything happens in the pipeline code itself. So that helped us segregate all of this stuff between various teams where no team can do something too crazy because they're hopefully we have human eyes on the where is this code getting deployed at the pipeline stage.
But the next generation will bring more into the automated testing and the actual taking the code and validating it, like running it through lint checks, syntax checks, security scans, so on. So that's another reason to go massively parallel on the containers front. So we can actually do more in a shorter time frame.
And since pipelines we can suck in from any Git repo, effectively at that point, I don't really care about the state on the Jenkins master a whole lot, because we can spin up a master for the cloud services team, let them run all their pipeline builds. We'll spin up the appropriate build agents either way. So if it comes from the cloud services Jenkins master or the enterprise services Jenkins master, either way, I can move those jobs around because they're just being slurped up as Git repositories either way, with the Jenkins files living Git repositories. So scalability we can hopefully solve kind of on demand.
And the bigger benefit of the pipelines with this approach is that you can have a single pipeline effect change in all environments. Your controls become apparent in your approval programs or your approval steps. So you have steps in your pipeline that would request a user to log into Jenkins, and only that user can approve the pipeline to progress further. And that progression would mean it goes from dev to stage or to production. And it's the containers in those environments that affect change with the IAM roles associated, so that they can't jump environments. So it's pretty restrictive in that sense, and pretty controllable and easily to scale and to make it do what you need.
Does it also work well with rollbacks or something if you have to do it?
Rollbacks?
Yeah.
Who does rollbacks?
So there's no rollbacks?
No, well, the entire model we're pushing for is to roll forward, so you push the fix out quicker with this approach. So it should work the same for rollbacks. It's just change the code and push it through the pipeline. You might speed the request process up.
Rollback Git, check rollback like what Git had or whatever, but that results in a new increment.
But we don't make mistakes.
Yeah, just one more question. So you mentioned a lot of these tools, but have you looked into the developer tools from AWS directly, replacing some of these with those?
I have looked into them briefly now, but so there's a couple of constraints on us here internally, is that there are internal patterns and practices in place, and it's a lift and shift into a more scalable model first, and then we can look at moving to newer, kind of more, I guess, serverless architectures.
We also have constraints in that we run most of our infrastructure on internal data centers. So limited ability to cloudify everything when we're not.
And to contact it, it becomes a point where you can't contact systems.
So out of curiosity, were you guys aware of like the Jenkins init Groovy process for provisioning Jenkins?
No.
Because I think that was the thing I thought was like ridiculously awesome. Of a lot of the Jenkins provisioning stuff I've seen in the past was always calling the Jenkins web APIs, which are somewhat limited and somewhat hacky when you go through like a plugin install process. So like your bootstrapping of Jenkins is usually kind of painful. Like to make a stateless Jenkins master, kind of awful. But it turns out there's this whole like init scripts of Groovy of, yeah, just put some text files here and it's all fine. I don't know, I thought that was amazing. Sweet.
How would you handle the actual update of the system, like of the master? How do you manage all the updates of plugins over time? So you said that you want to get rid of plugins, but then you say, okay, we want to go with pipelines. But for example, if you get rid of plugins, you need to go with absolute Groovy code. If you go with Groovy code, you go into normally into a forest of exceptions to allow this specific Groovy method. Do not allow that specific Groovy method, or run everything in sandbox and give, for example, your whole job the possibility of running everything. But in that case, it could have that the developer changes the job and is able to do essentially everything. So how do you handle this kind of?
So it's not essentially get rid of all plugins, it's removing the management of plugin installation and the enforcement of the plugin version into the init Groovy script. So that upon restart, Groovy will go to desired state rather than to if a user had permission to install a plugin and they did manually, it'll pull that back out when it goes to restart after the plugin installation, so they won't even get to see it. So it's a kind of a protection mechanism in that sense, that if somebody external got permission to install a plugin, it automatically reverts on restart to the previous state. So that's one side. So on the Jenkins, on the pipelines view, it's the pipelines you can have approved libraries, pre-approved libraries that they can call methods of. So we can create a centralized or a federated repository where teams can own some of that content, and you can subject it to a normal SDLC as a lifecycle, so that it moves through a pipeline of its own and gets published to the Chef server or to the Jenkins server, so that your build plans and your tools can consume new code from its own pipeline as such. Does that make sense? Or
Yeah, to make case I wanted to get rid of that completely, so I relied still on plugins, for example. Because, for example, something as stupid as reading a YAML file inside your repository, yeah, you can go with slap YAML as a library, but then you get into the madness of getting the whole library approved, or approve that specific, as I was saying, approve that specific job can run essentially everything, and that's not so nice. So I prefer the approach of going with plugins, where the plugin actually is always allowed into Jenkins, so everybody can just go there, use that specific function provided by the plugin, and you don't have to care at all about this kind of stuff, which also means that, for example, a developer who got its Jenkins file committed into the repository can essentially go there and modify his job, and as long as he uses something that is provided by plugins, essentially he has not to go into any kind of approval process or anything like that. That's a lot of time. But of course, on the other side, you get the problem that, especially for pipelines, plugins are getting developed very, very quickly. So from one day to another, you find extra functions or modifications to the existing functions. So that forces you to advance very, very quickly and to get a very quick release pace for the plugins update. So it's a bit a mess to manage in both ways.
So the biggest benefit I find with the libraries is that you get to encapsulate those kind of changes away from the build plans, in that you provide an API to your build plans, and that's what they consume. And then any changes underneath are transparent. That you update your library and it fixes the all the build plans, so that you're not going back in through all your builds, fixing a new method signature or.
And even if builds are reliant on specific versions of plugins, because you've removed state from Jenkins to the largest degree possible, and that you're pre-provisioning the entire system and managing the entire system, that gives you a platform now to have. You can manage the SDLC of Jenkins, so we can have a test Jenkins instance and a dev Jenkins instance and then a production Jenkins instance and test the pipelines on that. So by moving all jobs to pipelines, I've removed state from Jenkins. By managing the plugins external to an admin clicking around in Jenkins, we've removed all of that state. So I now have an instance that I can build on demands that's a known quantity of Jenkins master, so I can test all that as well.
So it sounds like this is a sort of a transition that you guys are working through, and obviously some done, some left to do. So it sounded like you started off with basically a lot of pets lying around. You know, each development team would have their own pet lying around, you know, that each contain their own Easter eggs lying inside it. How have you managed the process of bringing all of those pets into this new vision? And are there still skeletons in the closet of, we can't quite do that at the moment, but we'll get there?
There are definitely skeletons in the closet, and there always will be. It's just the nature of development. It becomes, is it feasible to fix versus just keep it as is, lift and shift?
Okay.
So the plan is to lift and shift from an on-site data center into an environment where we can actually provision dynamically and support it in the same sense that we can tear it down and spin it back up from completely from scratch to a usable state, and then it's to work through each of the projects to start to pipeline them, going from ones with high value first to ones with least.
We're a big company, but we're not that big. So luckily, going team by team, we'll get through it without too much hassle, we hope.
Okay.
And there's definitely going to be a lot more skeletons discovered. A few bodies buried here and there.
And would you see yourself, when you talk about, you know, working with individual teams to bring them on board to the new vision of, you know, Jenkins pipelines and all that other good stuff, would you start with the biggest one, or would you start with the smallest one?
So it's get a single point of one project through a pipeline, and then start to bring more of that project into a pipeline.
Okay.
And then to keep rinse and repeat. It's crawl, walk, run.
Right. Interesting. Okay, thank you.
I found previously what we're talking about, what I'm thinking about, it's about what we really delegating for the customers, I mean for the developers to do the job, and what we're keeping for ourselves as a system admin for DevOps, just ourselves. For me, like things like plugins and version of plugins, it's something really I prefer to keep quite secure and quite to take responsibility myself for this, because we're changing the version of Jenkins itself and different combination.
It can break a lot of things.
Yes, that's something I prefer to keep myself and not really delegate this for the particular teams, what possibly wrong, to decide them which really, what plugin they would like to update. That's okay, but we need to try this. That may affect the other jobs and the whole Jenkins master. Just my approach, I don't know.
That pain
It's
point
about
is
policy, what the current policy, what workflow, what you're delegating for them, what they know, what they can consume from the library, for example, and for certain patterns you have. But certain parts really of this process, I feel it's very belong to me or for the team, just for DevOps teams, not really for developers with high respect with them. So it's something about, it's not really very straightforward how to divide this responsibility. And
if you think of a Jenkins server, though, like any other service, where it has a certain API that has a certain feature set that it makes available to people, that's effectively a thing that we can unit test. And by removing state from the Jenkins master itself, I have a much more testable, iteratable system. So the hope is that we'll be able to iterate on plugin changes better, because we'll be able to do a rollback of build a new Docker image that has plugin version 1, build a test Jenkins in Docker with plugin version 1.2, run our suite of either tests or pipelines or whatever against it, see what breaks, see what falls out, and it removes the pain from doing a Jenkins upgrade because I can now deploy the entirety of my infrastructure and grab all of my pipeline jobs and test the entire thing end to end before I make it available to developers as well. So we can take Jenkins now and run it through a proper SDLC of like a dev, staging, production lifecycle, just like any other service, because we've managed to remove enough state where it becomes a safer operation. So also version.
Yeah, indeed. That's something. What you mentioned, things like infrastructure, the VMs or whatever VMs, or maybe Docker images. We normally have this. Well, from my experience, this we have to set up new builds, but the developers let us to know what they expect for such environment.
Mm-hmm.
So we're looking for preparing such slave, let's say, as a separate task. It's related for the whole build, but a little bit separate. It's more infrastructure related part that not all the time we have to care about some lab or whatever else, preparing this for us. And then we have environment, we have a set of plugins, we have a library, we're ready to go and whatever else. So it's a quite sliced process indeed.
Right, and by codifying all of that, so if you have the, this is what makes our Jenkins master Jenkins master. This is what makes Team A's build server their build server. This is what makes Team B's build server their build server. If you version control and like config manage that entire process, it's more painless. Because otherwise you're babysitting pets. So if I could just spin them up as necessary, if there's a change in the build plan for anyone, I update a config file in my configuration management system and off it goes. So hopefully it makes Jenkins suck less.
Yeah, also it feels like this is DevOps, while this, what you're talking about, is Dev and Ops separately. So if we're developers, we need you to do something for us, we have to wait for you. So it's kind of, you know, not where we want to go, right? Hopefully. Especially on the, you know, I understand if, you know, you're pushing directly to production, but to all the tests, right? You know, if I want to test quickly, I don't want to wait for you to approve a plugin version or whatever. I just want to do it, even if it fails, it completely destroys the machine, doesn't matter. We'll rebuild it, right?
Unless it not affect the other jobs that
Yeah,
run
exactly.
on the Jenkins master.
But what they're doing here is, I think, separated, so should be fine, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Can you go into a little bit more detail on the init Groovy script you said, so like the bootstrap problem of how you actually pull up the master itself?
Yeah, so
I
I can
think
walk
that
through
was-
one of the scripts or a couple of the scripts.
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Maybe I threw it out there. I had to step away for a second on a phone call. So yeah, that's cool.
Because I only found something there yesterday about someone who I think he was using Chef to instantiate his Jenkins master, and then using that to essentially install a C job to then call back to the job DSL to try and get the same end result. So it'd be interesting to see kind of.
So I've seen some of the chef stuff. They actually have a Groovy script resource, so you can actually execute the Groovy script against the remote. So it'll actually create the init script and run it. You can do it. You don't have to use the init process. You can actually send a script to the API and execute it that way as well. And there is actually another plugin where it'll actually allow you to execute Groovy scripts down on the agents as well.
Yeah.
Now I think it's kind of maintenance now. So the last time we've seen an update was 2015. But and there was a couple of security gaps in there where you could execute remote code. So just be careful with that one. But to go into so what was the question there?
So yeah, like the bootstrap problem of how you bring up your Jenkins master itself. So I mean, if you have your provision, be it Sol, Puppet or Chef, you get the actual service installs, but that's only got the service. You then need your callback to actually configure your Jenkins instance, which I presume is where your init scripts come in.
So Salt will just place the init scripts and it'll push down the data to drive those init scripts. So the init scripts will then take that data and execute the configuration on the Jenkins server. So here's a dev only script for setting the admin password and username. So this is all wrapped around Docker Compose. So we can actually test test manually on our own laptops in an isolated way. So this script only runs on the local host, and it's all included in the GitHub repository.
Sure.
So if you do the Docker Compose up, it'll bring you up an instance and try to install several plugins and try to configure. It'll configure a proxy because it's a requirement on our side to use a HTTP proxy. So it'll push the configuration for the HTTP proxy from environment variables based on your system. So if you have them set, it'll actually push them through to the container, and the container on Jenkins on init will try to set those parameters in the UI. And then I'll just bring up plugins. So here's the first attempt at the plugin script. So we just define an array of version number and plugin name. And it will try to enforce that version number. And it's only warning on the version number now, but it will eventually revert the plugin installation to that explicit version. There's a problem there with the dependency chain. I have to manually walk the chain to fix the issues.
So it doesn't take care of like transitive dependencies between plugins?
It does, but if I set the version back, I haven't tried it now, but it's supposed to. Whether it works correctly, I don't know.
Yeah. And is that then, is that baked in by default then in Jenkins? There's
Sure
obviously
is.
callbacks in the jar to...
Well, so the Jenkins home is like varlib Jenkins. You can make a directory in varlib Jenkins of like a init something that Jenkins will actually read all the Groovy scripts in that when you start it up by default.
Yeah, because I was wondering how it gets a context to like Jenkins.getInstance, but it's itself making the callback to run those, and then it knows.
Yes, so
Cool.
it's any library that's available to Jenkins is available to the Groovy at this level, because we're running outside the sandbox, so we're not limited to anything that's on the pipeline side.
Yeah.
We can actually pull in any of the libraries.
Cool.
And thus also configure those same libraries. So part of our process at the moment for our production Jenkins instances are install the Active Directory or LDAP plugin, whatever it's called, and then configure it. So step one, install a bunch of plugins. Step two, now make them useful. The goal again being we don't want humans messing with Jenkins, making it a pet.
So here's the credentials script. So this is what takes a JSON array. So it's a credential helper, and it'll create it's only a subset of the actual credentials you can create, but it's easily to extend to support whatever you need. That we provide the data to them, and then it'll actually provision based on the type of credential we require. So down below, here's an example of the setting a couple of SSH keys and a secret string and a username and password.
And are these a first run operation, or are they on reboot?
So it goes by alphanumeric, so based on, so that's hence the naming convention I have on the script 00.
Yeah. But they'll run, like if the service was to restart or the host was to
They'll run
restart
every time.
every time. Okay, so you can be guaranteed that even across reboots, they'll be consistent, even if someone should through UI change or add in anything.
It'll reset the password back to what it's set here,
Yeah.
but having your passwords linger in a file is, you just want to be sure about your permissions and ACLs.
So at the moment we have config management bits that populate these files, push them out to the Jenkins instance when they're created, and then do we delete after?
Yeah, so the rule is to delete these the sensitive files after. Other ones, like for installing plugins, are fine to leave running.
So
And so since our credentials come from Vault, in our case, we can have a single repository of secret stores, populate them all in our Jenkins master, which again keeps everything encrypted. So we have this slick end-to-end encryption secret store.
Jenkins also has a plugin to talk directly to Vault, but the way we're using Salt Master is it becomes is this node approved to pull these secrets? So we have the one point of ACL control through Salt.
So do you then just make direct CLI calls to Vault for details, knowing Vault will permit you to ask for those after the secure introduction?
So the Salt master, the minion, the Jenkins minion, will ask Salt for a one-time use key to unlock my secret. Vault will hand it back to Salt. Salt will push that down to the minion. The minion will then make the request directly to Vault and obtain the secret that way.
And in that, when the token is generated for the minion, it's generated with certain Vault policies.
Yeah.
So any minion can try to request the secret, and it will do that dance of here's your token. But whether or not that token has any ability to do anything is determined outside of that individual request.
Yeah, on the policy. Yeah. Cool.
And it's kind of on a sideline that's we'd hope to do something similar with certificates. So as a service in the same kind of fashion.
And then there's a handful of times when you need credentials in Jenkins itself in order for various things to occur. So we needed to make sure we had credentials populated in there. We can't have every job do an external Vault call out. Some plugins, for example, need passwords or SSH keys or whatever.
So I can show you. So I'll just kill off the container here on my local system, and I'll restart it and show you the DNA process running in the console. Paint dry here, but so it's prepared all plugins. So this is where it's stepping through the plugins. So we should see the init script. Where is there? So.
Would you guys unit test your own? Can you unit test those init scripts?
Yeah, you should be able to. So they're just
using the standard test harness, like.
Yeah. And the ones of most value from us from the start would be the integration tests.
Yeah.
So to just query the API to see if all the plugins did install and are at the correct versions, that would be more value, because we don't really care if the code is erroring, just that the system comes up as expected. But to walk through, so there's a problem here because it's trying to do the Active Directory installation and the plugin isn't installed. So there's no, I haven't found a way yet to describe the dependency chains of a Groovy script. So, but you can, I believe you can write entire plugins in Groovy as well this way. So that's it.
So worst case scenario, someone has crazy admin access to a Jenkins server, borks something up, restart it, goes back to default state.
So there it executed the proxy script.
So they're just numerically sorted then based on the local shell?
Yeah.
Are you using an artifact management, like an artifact repository then? And does it matter how many Jenkins masters you spin up at the same time?
So we do use artifact management, so we're using both Nexus and Artifactory. So I believe we want to pick one and run with just the one. But I would see the ideal being that we would have air-gapped quality repositories, so you'd have your dev, the Wild Wild West, anyone gets access to it. Your stage where it's restricted from the internet and only approved code through the pipelines gets there. And then your only production level artifacts get there. But at the varying steps, each repository would be available downstream. So you can pull a production environment into a dev environment and so on.
Artifactory has got really nice support for that. I would definitely recommend it.
And Nexus, the UI is a bit clunky. I don't like the change. Here's your shock.
Just wondering, how often are you changing the plugins by consuming this? It's quite really advanced for me, because we're very careful, because after each change, I guess we need to reboot the Jenkins, isn't it? That means the other jobs that run in parallel very largely will not control this, they're running by commit. So we have to have some approach to notify the developers or hang out the other processes not running. That's something trying to leverage how to consume such approach. Because,
What if you were to do an A/B deploy instead? So instead of updating your existing Jenkins instance, one of the things you could do was spin up a newer version of that same service. All of the existing instances that were, all the existing agents that were talking to the original instance will continue to run their jobs. You can bring up new instance, let people play around with that, start up a new thing, and just update CNAME record to say this is my new Jenkins instance. And then you can swap back and forth. So that way you could say, old thing continues to run, continues to finish, new thing now available, try it out.
So the other side is when we move, probably the initial goal would be to wrap jobs in pipelines, because pipelines they can persist a master restart. So the jobs are running on ephemeral instances in EC2 or containers. If you restart the master, they should juggle on just fine.
well,
But there's here and there that's
I guess so. If you have such priority for a certain task to make this plugin version to change better dynamically from project, that's really way to go for sure. Yeah.
Cool, anything else? All right, thanks, Damien.
Thank you.